And a good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Issues and Attitudes. My name is Jeff Owens, manager at WEIU. My co-host is Gerard Singleton. Welcome, Gerard.
Good afternoon, Jeff.
And today we are going to be talking all things Mattoon Library and Mattoon History Center. We have Carl Walworth. Welcome, Carl.
Good to be with you, Jeff.
Pull up that mic just a little bit, my man.
Okay.
And then Chris Suerdieck, the curator of the local history center, is here. Chris, welcome.
Well, thanks for having us back.
Appreciate you being here today on this kind of chilly Monday day of recording here, or day of live. I guess, why don't we just talk a little bit about what's going on right now at the library in general, and then we'll get into some specifics at the History Center and the library.
Okay. Well, we're we're planning for the spring and summer. Summer's our high season when school's out, summer read and movies in the park. Those kinds of things. We're coming over to Kids Day here in just a few weeks.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. Really a couple of the headlines recently have been, we had some transition on our staff. Beth Pugh, who was with us for more than 6.5 years and was really a big part of a lot of our growth over those years, moved on. Very happy for Beth and her career move. And we think we've made some really good, brought in some good people to follow in her footsteps. We brought in Abby DeBurr, who I know has been on this show before, and Abby's been with us for a little over a week and off to a really fast start. And Laura Severson, who I think you know as well, and Laura has a great background. Laura was a volunteer with us and still is. She's ramping up her role, and so both of those are things that people will see going forward. The other headline, this time of year, our friends at the Illinois Heartland Library System, they track checkouts through the year, and they track what it would cost if somebody had checked out that book. In the last year, it was like $1.3 million is the value of the physical books. When you add our digital stuff in there as well, you're at almost $1.7 million of what people would have paid for the things that they checked out. And we do that for one main reason, is to show the value of what we do. We want people to know the library is a place that is a community gym. It's a place where people come. It's also has a great value to it. And those savings, by the way, don't even include the kinds of things we'll talk about with Chris. If you put a dollar value on that, put a dollar value on our programming like story time, a dollar value on just having people come in and be able to hang out with us. I don't know exactly how to quantify all of that. But it all makes, our tax levy, it's about 4 times our tax levy is kind of the value of what our services are. So those are some of the things we've done recently.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Chris, you have anything to add about that?
Carl summed that all up pretty well. I would just say, I point out to people that visit the History Center almost daily that I consider, we're in the 1903 Carnegie Library, and I consider the Mattoon Public Library to be the crown jewel of the city of Mattoon.
There you go. I'm going to have you speak up or get in there just a little bit more.
Closer?
Go ahead. Good. Gerard?
I would say, so is there any particular program or exhibit at the library that's been proven popular among patrons in recent times?
Well, we regularly do children's and adult programming. Chris had one of our best adult programs. He had more than 100 people talking about Mattoon and the Civil War. We had a Holocaust survivor that had a similar kind of crowd. We've done some musical programs that have been popular. All of our children's programs do really well. Recently, we had one of our biggest story times ever. We had 38 kiddos on a Friday morning.
Wow.
And they all bring an adult with them. And so if you were to go up on our second floor on a Friday morning, you'd see kids playing. We have interactive kinds of things for kids to play with. They hear a story, and the parents enjoy visiting with each other as well. It's a busy place. It's a very busy place.
Chris, for the people who don't know, you're kind of you retired as a businessman in Mattoon, and you had this idea to come up with a history center. Did you work? And can you take us back through a little bit of the process? Because that thing has really went from this great idea to it's just something that people talk about all the time.
Well, absolutely. Thank you. So after I retired, about a year after I retired, I was really just kind of casting around for something to do, and I had lunch one day with Carl, and we were talking about the local history room, and I still have trouble getting people to quit calling it a room. And so he said, how would you like to go down there and kind of sort stuff out and see if we can make something of all the collections we have down there. So really it took me about a year to just go through, sort out things, find files, find pictures, find documents. And as I uncovered stuff, I would tell Carl, I said, this stuff needs to be on display. So the thing about what we now call the History Center is it's grown from just one room to now it's basically six. It's almost the entire original basement of the library. And so every room kind of has a little bit of a theme to it. And I kind of had a picture of what I wanted that section to look like, but the overall has just grown. We never had a master plan. It's like, okay, you can have this room, and then when I had that room, it's like, okay, I still got more stuff. Now where can I go? Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of taken a life of its own. And I tell people often ask, and sometimes people even confuse us a little bit with the Depot Museum, and that is operated by the Coles County Historical Society, and they've endeavored to cover the history of the county. And actually, I'm a member of the Coles County Historical Society. But what we really tried to focus on at the library is, since we are in the Mattoon Public Library, everything there is focused 100% on something that relates to Mattoon's history. And I usually like to just say it's industries, events, institutions, and businesses that formed and helped create the city and make it what it is today.
That's cool. Do you take ideas from the public if they think, hey, we need more stuff about this, about automobiles, or about, I know there's just tons of different things on there.
No, absolutely. And I get inquiries. And again, as the thing has grown from, one room to 6 rooms, and that's been over the last 5 years. And one of the things that I monitor very closely, and I think we've talked about this before, is there's a Facebook page on, everybody loves or hates Facebook, but there's a page called The Good Old Days in Mattoon, Illinois. Yeah. And so that's about the only thing I do on Facebook. If you look at my Facebook page, there is nothing there. But you have to have a page to be able to post. Yeah. So I monitor that page really daily, and people all the time, and a lot of the ideas we've done for either exhibits or to flesh out or expand an exhibit is there'll be inquiries. Somebody will post something and say, hey, I remember, when the railroads, came through Mattoon, and who remembers this or who remembers that? So those things do lend a lot to some of the things we focus on, because I try and create the displays around things that I think people will be interested in. But we also try everything that I put on, because all of our displays are basically permanent. So everything that we put on display, one of my criteria is, will somebody be interested in this 20 years from now?
That makes sense,
because I hope it's still there 20 years from now.
Okay.
I like that. In your expert opinion, what would be the most maybe exciting or interesting item or material or document you found and been able to put on display?
Well, let's put it this way. A guy told me a long, long time ago, an expert is somebody with a briefcase 50 miles from home. So I am not going to pretend to be an expert. The two probably it'd be hard to quantify one or the other. The two probably most significant things are Mattoon in the Civil War section, which we developed about 2 years ago. And it all, again, revolves all around Mattoon's role in the Civil War, because we were a major railhead for the 2 major railroads in Illinois. So troops, supplies, horses, ammunition, prisoners of war, hospital trains all came through Mattoon day and night during the Civil War. So Mattoon played a very significant part in the Civil War. And as Carl alluded to, last October, we actually did an in-house program on Mattoon in the Civil War. And we had over 100 people come to that. But for the other part of my answer, I would say the other really significant thing is we just opened the second, what I would consider major standalone exhibit on the history of the subway through Mattoon, which colloquially we call the subway the lowered railroad tracks for the Illinois Central that go through Mattoon. And that project was done in 1914, and they basically dug all the way through Mattoon from north of DeWitt to south to Marshall, and lowered the Illinois Central tracks, effectively divide the city in two as far as that big trench. And you could really say that it forever changed the landscape of Mattoon, because it made Mattoon dependent on bridges and the railroad crossings. So it was a very significant project. At the time, it cost over $1 million in 1914, so it was called the $1 Million Dig. But the impetus to do this is in earlier time, we had a couple of different displays on that project, but we didn't have the mammoth exhibit that we have now. And so the genesis of that was we had the opportunity to acquire 70 8x10 glass plate negatives taken by the Illinois Central photographers at the time of the project. Wow. So those 70 photos make up the nucleus of the exhibit, and they cover everything from the steam shovels digging the trench to the building of the bridges to the building of the Illinois Central Depot that's still there. So, and the interesting thing about it to me is it's a significant part of the history of Mattoon, but it's also a very significant part of railroad history. And we are getting a lot of interest and visitors that are railroad buffs that know nothing about Mattoon, but they come because they want to see the project itself. So it's kind of been, it's really opened us up to a whole
avenue.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
When they dug, did they find? Was it anything found in the dig, or was it? I mean, was there anything here before, or was that
A lot of dirt.
Just
lot
dirt?
of
Okay, I didn't know
Yeah,
if they
no,
would- you just wonder if they would have found anything.
No, nothing of any significance that I know of. But
When you first saw those first 70 pictures, I mean, take us to that day when you get to see those for the
when I
first time.
I actually just got a teaser. I got to see one because the person that was selling them was holding them very close, and they were actually trying to sell them. They had them out on the market. They were trying to sell them to a publisher, and they were very expensive. And I would say that because we have some very generous patrons, we were able to raise money. Carl and I reached out to some of our patrons. So these were purchased without library funds.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Yes, so they were completely independently supported, but we now own them. And it probably took us there was probably a period of a year from when I first became aware of them to when we finally kind of did a deal to be able to acquire them. And like I said, we just made the determination that these were too valuable to leave Mattoon.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Hey, Carl, what about you when you first saw those pictures? Were you just like, I mean, your media background there, and I mean, it had to be pretty cool, huh?
Well, there's a couple things about the project that people may or may not, some people may not know. I guess people know that when you stand at the YMCA or at the depot, I mean, before this project, I mean, you could walk across to what is now called lumber. It wasn't called lumber at the time. I mean, there was no what's now known as the subway there, and maybe that's common knowledge, maybe it's not. But I mean, that was just prairie. That was just, you could just walk right across there. And so when you see this project take shape, and you see what they did to make that happen, when the kind of stretch that Chris just described from DeWitt over, that would be one thing. The other thing that is closely related to this project is, when you think of Illinois, you think of Mattoon, you think of, we're here in the prairie against some of the flattest part of the world. I've had some of my family that doesn't live here, say they've never seen any place this flat. But in this project, the steepest, Chris can describe it better than I can, but the steepest grade and the most severe grade that the Illinois Central faced was in Magnet. And one of the reasons why the trains had to slow down, they didn't want the trains to slow down because they had to keep their speed up so that they could get up the hill at Magnet. And so so part of this project was to kind of flatten that out. And I don't know a lot of people that drive down the Magnet Road anymore, but if you do, you go down there a few miles and you'll see the overpass, which is
higher, yeah,
which is still there,
yeah.
And you can kind of see what the situation there for that grade. But that was a significant part of this project, and that was news to me.
the reason people use the magnetic road is when that train is stopped and you can't get anywhere
You can't
in
get nowhere.
Mattoon.
Yeah,
You can go to,
We won't go there today.
Exactly, exactly.
That's why you go out there.
Right.
My next question would be for both of you, I guess. Has technology or like the digital aspect changed any, like the way library operations go around now, or are you implementing any new tools to help with either cataloging or, education or something like that?
No, absolutely. I think I've been there almost 8 years. When I started, I would say it was in the mid single digits of our checkouts were digital, and in the last few months it's approached a quarter, 24%. And part of that's because we've been able to utilize, we now have 5 digital platforms that we use, including, I'm a real newspaper guy, including one that features periodicals and including the local newspaper, which you can get with a library card every day. And but there's also ebooks, audiobooks, movies, TV shows, comics. All those are in part of our platforms, and so we see that transition. And for me personally, I mean, we were seeing this transition in the news business, and I would say in my view at least, it wasn't handled very well. And so hopefully with that experience, we've made that a little bit more of a transition, because there's still, when you think about a quarter of your business being digital, that still means that there's still
Roughly
great
75%.
A majority,
the
yeah.
majority is still checking out books. And so you don't just kind of throw that out the window. You have to continue to service that group. But that's one of the challenges in the library world. But the short answer to your question is there definitely is a trend, and we're doing our best to keep up with it. At the same time, we're not forgetting about those folks that want to hold a book.
Right.
Now, Chris, we're the situation of the History Center right now, what's twirling around up in that mind of yours of, I'm going to ask you, what's next, or what are you going to add? Are you going to ask Carl for some more room?
Yeah. Well, we're pretty well. The room question right now is kind of off the table. We're pretty, because I don't think we're going to build another addition to the library. But a lot of what I'm working on now is expanding just some of the exhibits we've got, doing, because I still do a lot of research. And to your question about the digitalization, we've got in the History Center part, not in the overall library, we've got over 15,000 Mattoon photos digitized. I mean, we have a wealth of photos. And I'm all the time, when I pick off some time when I'm not working on a project, I'm working on expanding some of those files. And what I still like to have, just like we talked about the books, I still like everything that's on display. I still have a paper file for, or a physical file, because I still like to be able to lay my hands on a document. So as far as Carl and I, we got a couple projects we're talking about that we're thinking about that we're probably not really ready to roll out at this time, but we're always thinking about what we can do to enhance the process. I would say kind of our biggest challenge for the History Center is, and we're getting visitors now almost daily. Usually a few people a day, and sometimes multiple groups of people. But I still hear almost all the time, I hear two things. We had no idea this was here, and we had no idea you had all this material here. So, so opportunities like this to get the word out. And one of the things that I'm really proud of and really happy of is, and I'm also a member of the Illinois State Historical Society, and they publish a bi-monthly magazine called Illinois Heritage. And in the January-February issue of Illinois Heritage, they did a profile of our History Center.
Really?
Oh, wow.
So that went statewide. So I'm hoping that we'll see some interest from people that pick up their magazine and see that and say, hey, some Saturday, let's drive to Mattoon and see this History Center.
You're talking, when the History Center is basically, there's like 8 different hubs on the website where people can look at. Are you looking for anything to enhance those? Is there anything out there that's missing that you would like to put a call to action out today that said, hey, if anybody knows something about Montgomery Wards in 1971 or whatever, is there anything that's just you're just itching to get?
Well, I'm always looking for photos.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the biggest thing. And what's interesting, I think it's kind of started to snowball, is I'm getting people probably weekly bringing photos or documents that they're saying, I'm cleaning out my uncle's house, or we're downsizing. I've saved all this stuff. My kids don't want it. I mean, you're finding that this generation, the youngest generation, they haven't discovered history yet. When they're 50, they'll say, "Oh, I wish I hadn't let my mom throw that stuff away." But right now, they don't want it. So we're getting a lot of stuff like that, and so I'm always adding to the photo files. So we have a very extensive, grocery stores, drugstores.
Drugstores is amazing how many drugstores have been in Mattoon? Incredible.
Off the top of my head, I think there's 75 plus.
It's just unreal.
Yeah. Well, the biggest, most surprising number, there's 622 grocery stores. And of course, I'll never get a photo of all those. But and part of that reason too is because they turned over. So like everybody in our generation remembers Ice Noggles.
Yeah.
There were 10 grocery stores in that building, starting in 1912. Ice Noggles was the last one, not the first one.
There you go.
So that's what accounts for that.
I love those little nuggets of information. Yeah.
But that's what accounts for that number. Yeah.
And there was a couple on that same street.
Exactly.
Growing up. I remember that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was gonna ask. So we know that the library kind of makes its living off supporting and being supported by the community. Are there any opportunities for community members to volunteer or get involved with initiatives at the library? Are you looking for any help like that?
Well, Chris is a volunteer, and he's basically almost full time. I mean, I would say.
And you still don't pay him at all, Carl?
No. Every year when he hands out W-2s, I'm like, "Where's mine?"
So absolutely, we have what I would call, there's a group of. And like I mentioned, Laura's a volunteer, and she's a key person, and so we have some people in those kinds of roles. We use some volunteers in some other roles as well, but one of the things we try to be good at is to engage with our community, to listen to the community, and to be part of it. Part of that is philanthropy. Part of that is just people our friends group is being re-energized. Courtney Jordan is taking on the presidency, and so we have a new core group leading our friends group, and they're doing some different kinds of activities. So absolutely, volunteers are important to us, and without our volunteers, our library wouldn't be what it is.
I also saw on the website this morning you offer free notary. Is that
we do? And that again comes from when people come into our building, and when you get enough people come in and say, "Boy, do you notarize?" By several years, and you say, "Well, no, we finally figured it out, right? Well, maybe we ought to get some people to be certified to be notaries." And I don't know exactly what numbers we notarize, but it's a few times a week, I would say.
Okay.
You might
just
also
another service.
and you might also mention another service is the Mattoon Public Library probably has the last still functioning fax machine in Coles County. That's a free service to patrons.
It is, and that came about the same way. Crazy me, I thought everybody was in a scan to email mode, and so at one point I killed our fax line, but then we kept getting people coming in saying, can we fax here? And I found out that there are some agencies, and I get this, that the only way they'll communicate with you is by fax. And the reason I get it is because if somebody tried to say, well, you have to monitor this email address with getting all this spam and junk and figure out what's real and what's not, I mean, that would be a horrible job. But, so they're still in the fax world. And so we actually took a step back and got back into the fax world.
For safety reasons, I understand the fax. So it is you're not using a mail server where people could get their eyes on some documents. But yeah, that's kind of cool though. It's a good story too. I love stories.
Yeah.
A few minutes left today. We're talking to Carl Walworth and Chris Suerdieck from the local history center and the Mattoon Public Library. We talked last week to the Eastern Illinois Library and some of the things that they offer. Do you work with other area libraries to share ideas or to have think tanks or anything?
Well, we're part of the Illinois Heartland Library System, and we share a collection with 300 and some libraries downstate. There's a van that goes around 5 days a week and takes, you can check out books from any one of those libraries with a Mattoon card. And so they do some things They just had a member day where you could share ideas and that kind of thing. So I would say yes and no. We are part of the library system. However, we operate independently. We have our own board. That's who hires the library directors, our board. Board's appointed by the mayor, but our boards are independent, and they run the library. We're very fortunate that we have a great board, and I say we're fortunate. I haven't experienced not having a great board, but I've heard through the grapevine that not everybody does, and so we have a great board. And Chris was on the board for 20-some years, and so he knows the importance of the board.
I was just curious about, I guess this is both in both respective departments, any long-term goals for either the History Center or the library in general, whether it be cosmetically or departmentally?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, our long-term goals are to continue to grow in the areas where we need to grow, like the digital area that you ask about. To continue to look for ways where we can find niches or to be part of the community. As far as our building, Chris is an expert on our building because he was part of the group that expanded it, and there was in 93 and 94, there was an expansion and renovation that more than doubled the size of the library. But the original building is a 1902, 1903 vintage Carnegie Library, and we think that's special. A lot of communities, or many communities, have let their Carnegie libraries go for whatever reason. Mattoon has not, and so we have no intention of letting it go. And so we think the character and I think it's probably the most significant architectural building in Mattoon. If it's not number one, it's certainly in the top 2 or 3. And so maintaining that and keeping that is a challenge, but it's also something that I think is very important. And so we're not planning on going anywhere as far as building goes. That being said, we do want to keep up with the times, and that's one of the challenges, is to put 2025 library into an old building, and that's part of the fun of it.
There you go. Minute left, Chris. Anything you want to add?
Well, I'd add to Carl's comment there. I was on the library board when we did that addition, and part of the board then had the vision to keep the building and keep the style from the original architecture. And so we were fortunate that we found an architect, Don Hance from Mattoon. So if you stand across the street, because the only way you can tell the new building from the old is the weathering, and because we made a committed effort to keep the style and function of the library matching the original, and the original was designed by a firm in Milwaukee that were nationally known for designing public buildings. So I mean, it's got some significance in that regard also.
Guys, we're out of time. I have plenty more questions
talk
we'd ask,
all
but
day.
that's a fast 28 minutes today.
Yep.
So, Carl Walworth, Chris Suerdieck, good friends at WEIU. Great for you guys to come over today, and good to see you both. Thanks for everything you do.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
thank you.